The sound of breaking glass pierced the evening quiet of Willow Creek, followed by a string of colorful curses that made even the most hardened cowboys passing by raise their eyebrows. Lucy Montgomery stood amid the wreckage of what used to be her father's prized crystal decanter, her hands trembling with fury as she read the letter that had just arrived by stagecoach. The year was 1875, and at 23 years old, Lucy had just been abandoned by her fiancé for the third time in her life. "That's it," she declared to her Aunt Martha, who had rushed into the parlor at the sound of shattering glass. "I am done with men and their empty promises. No man will ever wait for me, and I'm through waiting for them." Martha sighed, bending down to help collect the larger shards of crystal. "You're young, Lucy. Don't make sweeping declarations you'll regret later." "I won't regret this one," Lucy said, her voice like steel as she crumpled the letter in her fist. "From this day forward, I'm living for myself and no one else." Martha glanced worriedly at her niece, noting how the late afternoon sun caught the auburn highlights in Lucy's chestnut hair, how her green eyes flashed with determination. Lucy had always been beautiful, but disappointment had hardened her features into something more formidable. Martha had raised Lucy since her brother and sister-in-law died of typhoid fever when Lucy was just 12, and she'd never seen her this adamant. "Your father's store will be mine now, as it should have been from the start," Lucy interrupted, straightening her skirts. "I don't need Randall Thompson or any other man to run it for me." Martha stood, clutching the gathered glass fragments. "The town won't take kindly to a woman shopkeeper." "Then the town can find somewhere else to buy their supplies," Lucy retorted, marching toward the door. "I'm going to the store right now to take inventory. Father's been gone 3 years. It's time I took charge of my inheritance." As Lucy stepped onto the wooden sidewalk of Willow Creek's Main Street, she held her head high, ignoring the curious glances from townspeople who'd surely heard the commotion. The small Wyoming Territory town had grown considerably in the past decade, but it was still small enough that news, especially scandalous news, traveled faster than telegram wire. Montgomery General Store stood at the corner of Main Street and River Road, a sturdy 2-story building with the shop below and living quarters above. For 3 years since her father's passing, Lucy had allowed Randall to manage the store while they were engaged, believing his promises of marriage and partnership. Now she saw it for what it was: a man taking advantage of a woman's property while stringing her along. The bell above the door jangled as Lucy entered, and a few customers looked up in surprise. Behind the counter stood Jessie, the young woman who had worked at the store for years. "Miss Montgomery," Jessie said, eyes wide, "we weren't expecting you today. Where's Mr. Thompson?" Lucy asked, removing her gloves one finger at a time. "He left on the noon stage," Jessie replied nervously. "Said he had business in Cheyenne. He won't be coming back," Lucy announced, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "As of today, I'll be managing Montgomery General Store myself." A man in dusty range clothes chuckled. "A lady storekeeper. That'll be the day." Lucy fixed him with a stare that could freeze whiskey. "Mr. Parker, I believe you owe this establishment $12 for supplies you took on credit last month. I'll expect payment by week's end." The man's smile vanished and he tugged at his collar uncomfortably. "Now, Miss Lucy, Randall and I had an understanding. Mr. Thompson no longer speaks for this store or for me," Lucy interrupted. $12 by Friday, or I'll have to refuse further credit." The store fell silent as customers exchanged glances. Lucy walked behind the counter, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction as she tied on an apron that had hung on a nearby hook. This was her domain now, her father's legacy, and she would not let another man take it from her. As the last customer filed out, Jessie approached cautiously. "Miss Lucy, are you sure about this? Running a store ain't easy work." "I've been watching my father run this store since I was a child," Lucy replied, checking the ledger, "and I've been keeping the books since I was 16. I know more about this business than Randall ever did. It's just," Jessie hesitated, "people around here expect a man to run a business. Then people around here will need to adjust their expectations," Lucy said firmly. "I'm through waiting for a man to validate my existence, Jessie. From now on, I make my own way." Little did Lucy know that her declaration would soon be tested by the arrival of a stranger who would challenge everything she thought she knew about men and promises. Mack Sullivan guided his horse down the main street of Willow Creek with the weariness of a man who'd been riding for too long. At 30 years old, Mack had spent the last decade drifting across the frontier, taking work where he could find it, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. His latest job as a cattle driver had ended abruptly when the trail boss accused him of cheating at cards, an accusation that had cost him his pay and nearly his life. With just $15 to his name and a horse that needed rest, Mack knew he needed to find work fast. Willow Creek wasn't his destination, just a stop on the way to somewhere else, somewhere he might finally find what he'd been searching for across the vast expanse of the Western Territories. Mack dismounted outside the livery stable, his tall frame unfolding stiffly after days in the saddle. His dark hair was too long, his beard too unkempt, but his blue eyes remained alert as he surveyed the town. "Cost you 2 bits a day for board," said the stable owner, eyeing Mack's worn saddle and tired horse. "I'll pay for 3 days," Mack replied, counting out the coins. "She needs grain and a good brushing." The stable owner nodded, taking the money. "New in town, just passing through," Mack said, the same response he'd given in countless towns before. "Know of any work available? Might check with Sheriff Brooks. Sometimes hires deputies temporary, like when cattle drives come through." The man paused. "Or try Montgomery's store. Heard the lady who runs it now might need help with deliveries and such." "Lady?" Mack raised an eyebrow. The stable owner chuckled. "Miss Lucy Montgomery. Took over after her fiancé ran off with her money 3 months back. Town's still talking about it. She's been running that place with just a girl helper, but word is she needs a man for the heavy work. Too proud to admit it, though." Mack shouldered his saddlebags. "Where's this store?" "Corner of Main and River. Can't miss it. But fair warning, Miss Montgomery's got a sharp tongue and not much patience for drifters." With a nod of thanks, Mack headed down the street, his boots kicking up dust with each step. He wasn't looking for complications, just honest work to replenish his funds before moving on. A prickly female storekeeper wasn't ideal, but beggars couldn't be choosers. The Montgomery General Store was larger than he expected, with a wide porch and large display windows showcasing everything from tools to fabrics. A bell announced his entry, and Mack removed his hat as he stepped inside, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the dimmer interior. Behind the counter stood a young woman with chestnut hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She was helping an elderly customer select tea, but her eyes flicked to Mack momentarily, assessing him in that instant with a coolness that suggested she'd already found him wanting. Mack browsed the shelves, taking his time. The store was well-stocked and meticulously organized, suggesting a proprietor who knew her business. When the elderly woman left, Mack approached the counter. "Help you with something?" the woman asked, her tone businesslike. "I'm looking for work," Mack said directly. "Heard you might need someone for deliveries, heavy lifting." Her green eyes narrowed slightly. "Who told you that, man at the livery? Did he now?" She straightened, and Mack noticed she was taller than most women, though still a head shorter than himself. "Well, Mr. Sullivan, Mack Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, I run this store quite efficiently without male assistance, despite what the gossips of this town might believe." There was a defiance in her stance that suggested she'd had this conversation before. Mack simply nodded. "Just asking, madam. No offense meant." She seemed surprised by his easy acceptance, as if she'd expected an argument. Before she could respond, the back door opened, and a younger woman staggered in, struggling with a large crate. "Miss Lucy, the flour delivery's here, but there's 5 more crates and they're awful heavy." The crate slipped from her grasp. Mack moved without thinking, lunging forward to catch it before it hit the floor. The weight of it nearly took him down. It had to be at least 50 pounds of flour. "Where would you like this?" he asked calmly, looking to the woman he now knew was Lucy Montgomery. Lucy's mouth tightened, but practicality apparently won out over pride. "In the storeroom, through that door." Mack carried the crate through, setting it carefully on the indicated shelf. When he returned, Lucy was scribbling something on a piece of paper. $2 a day for deliveries and stock work, she said without looking up. 6 days a week, Sundays off. You'll start at 7 and finish when the work is done, usually around 6. I don't tolerate drinking on the job, gambling, or crude language in my store. If that suits you, you can start tomorrow. Mack considered the offer. The pay was fair and he could stretch out his stay, give his horse more time to recover. It suits me. Very well. She finally looked up, fixing him with those direct green eyes. One more thing, Mr. Sullivan. I've had my fill of men who make promises they don't keep. If you take this job, I expect reliability. The first time you don't show up when expected is the last time you work for me. Is that clear? Crystal clear, Miss Montgomery. Good, 7 o'clock tomorrow. She turned away, effectively dismissing him. As Mack left the store, he couldn't help but wonder what had happened to make a young woman so distrustful. But it wasn't his concern. This was just temporary work, a way station on his journey to wherever he was going next. By the time Lucy Montgomery discovered what kind of man he truly was, he'd be long gone from Willow Creek. The next morning, Lucy arrived at the store at 6:45, as was her custom. She'd spent most of the night wrestling with her decision to hire Mack Sullivan. On one hand, she desperately needed the help. Spring shipments were coming in daily, and there was no denying that having a man handle the heavy crates would free her and Jesse to focus on customers and inventory. On the other hand, hiring a drifter went against her vow of self-reliance. He probably won't even show up, she muttered to herself as she unlocked the front door. Men like Sullivan, handsome, confident cowboys with eyes the color of a summer sky, didn't stick around. She'd learned that lesson 3 times over. Lucy busied herself with morning preparations, lighting lamps and checking the cash drawer. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at the back door. Surprised, she went to answer it, finding Mack Sullivan standing there, clean-shaven and wearing a fresh shirt under his worn leather vest. "Good morning, Miss Montgomery," he said, hat in hand. Lucy blinked, momentarily thrown by his punctuality and improved appearance. "Mr. Sullivan, you're on time." The corner of his mouth twitched. "You seemed like a woman who values punctuality." "I do," she replied, recovering her composure. "The delivery wagon needs loading. We have orders to take to 3 ranches today." She pointed to a stack of crates labeled with customer names. "Those go on first, heaviest on the bottom." Mack nodded and set to work without comment. Lucy watched surreptitiously as he efficiently loaded the wagon, his movements economical and practiced. He was stronger than he looked, handling 100-pound flour sacks with apparent ease. By mid-morning, the wagon was loaded and Mack was waiting for further instructions. Lucy handed him a list and a map she'd drawn. The Circle T Ranch is first, then the Wallace Place, then Harding's. "Mr. Harding will try to negotiate the price down. Don't let him. The prices are fair as marked." "Yes, madam." "And Mr. Sullivan," Lucy added as he climbed onto the wagon seat, "I expect you back before closing. No detours to saloons or other establishments." Something flashed in his eyes, irritation, perhaps, or amusement, but he simply nodded. "I'll be back by 6. As the wagon pulled away, Lucy realized she'd been perhaps unnecessarily sharp with him. But experience had taught her that clear boundaries were essential, especially with men who drifted into town with mysterious pasts and uncertain futures. Throughout the day, Lucy found herself glancing at the clock more often than usual. Jessie noticed. Of course, the girl didn't miss much. "Wondering if your new man will come back?" Jessie asked as they restocked shelves during a quiet moment. "He's not my man, he's an employee," Lucy corrected. "And I'm not wondering, I'm keeping track of time." Jessie smiled knowingly but said nothing more. At 5:45, the sound of wagon wheels announced Mack's return. Lucy pretended to be absorbed in the ledger as he entered through the back door, carrying a stack of receipts. "All deliveries made as instructed," he reported, placing the papers on the counter. "Mr. Harding tried to haggle, but I held firm on the prices." Lucy examined the receipts, finding everything in order. She couldn't help but be impressed. Randall had always returned with excuses about why he'd accepted less than the marked prices. "Well done, Mr. Sullivan." She counted out his day's wages. "Tomorrow we receive a large shipment from back east. I'll need you here at 6 instead of 7. She expected some protest at the earlier hour, but Mack simply pocketed the money and nodded. "6 it is. Anything else you need done before I go?" Lucy hesitated. There were some heavy shelves in the storeroom that needed moving, a job she'd been putting off for weeks. "Actually, yes, if you have time." For the next hour, Mack rearranged the storeroom according to Lucy's instructions, creating a more efficient space that would make inventory and restocking easier. When they finished, Lucy was surprised to find herself almost enjoying his company. Unlike most men she knew, Mack didn't feel the need to fill silence with empty talk, and he listened carefully to her directions without arguing or suggesting better ways to do things. "That's much improved," Lucy said, surveying the reorganized space. "Thank you." "Just doing my job," Mack replied, but there was a note of satisfaction in his voice. "See you at 6 tomorrow, Miss Montgomery." After he left, Lucy sat at her desk, troubled by an unexpected realization. For the first time in months, she'd spent an entire day not thinking about Randall's betrayal or her own humiliation. Instead, she'd been focused on the business, and if she were honest, on the quiet, competent man who had entered her employ. "It doesn't mean anything," she told herself firmly. "He's just passing through like all the rest." But as she locked up the store that night, Lucy couldn't help wondering if Mack Sullivan would indeed appear at 6 the next morning, and why she cared so much whether he did. At 5:30 the next morning, Mack was already awake in his rented room above the barber shop. He'd splurged on proper lodging after his first day's wages, unwilling to sleep another night in the livery loft. The room was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window overlooking the main street. As he shaved in the gray pre-dawn light, Mack reflected on his new employer. Lucy Montgomery was unlike any woman he'd encountered in his travels. Most female business owners he'd met were widows who'd inherited their husbands' establishments, maintaining them out of necessity rather than choice. Lucy, however, ran her store with the confidence and acumen of someone born to the task. There was something else about her too, a wariness in her eyes that spoke of past hurts. Mack recognized it because he saw the same look in his own reflection some mornings. At 5 minutes to 6, Mack arrived at the store's back entrance. To his surprise, lamplight already glowed from within, and when he knocked, Lucy opened the door immediately. "You're early," she said, sounding almost disappointed, as if she'd expected him to fail this test. "So are you," Mack countered with a slight smile. Lucy turned away quickly. "The shipment arrives by 8. We need to clear space and prepare the receiving area." They worked side by side in the cool morning hours, moving stock and preparing for the incoming delivery. Mack noticed how Lucy's movements became more fluid and natural when she thought no one was watching her. When customers were present, or when she was directly addressing him, she maintained a rigid formality, but alone with her inventory, she hummed softly and moved with the graceful efficiency of someone completely in their element. The freight wagon arrived precisely at 8, laden with crates and barrels from the Eastern manufacturers. For the next several hours, Mack unloaded, unpacked, and stored goods under Lucy's direction. By mid-afternoon, his muscles ached pleasantly from the honest labor. "These came for you personally," Mack said, handing Lucy a small package marked with her name. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Lucy withdrew her hand quickly, as if burned. "Thank you," she said stiffly, setting the package aside without opening it. "If you don't mind my asking," Mack ventured, "how long have you run the store?" Lucy paused in her inventory notations. "My father founded this store 20 years ago. I've been involved since I was old enough to count change, but I've been the sole proprietor for 3 months. "You've done well with it," Mack observed. "Not many stores this size in towns twice as big." A flicker of pride crossed her face before she masked it. "My father believed in offering quality and fair prices. I've continued his practice. And before 3 months ago." Lucy's expression closed like a book snapping shut. "That's not relevant to your employment, Mr. Sullivan." Mack recognized the rebuke and nodded, returning to his work. He'd heard enough town gossip to piece together the story of a fiancé who'd managed the store and then absconded with money, leaving Lucy to fend for herself. It explained her distrust, her insistence on punctuality and reliability. As closing time approached, Lucy seemed to be fighting fatigue. The long day of inventory and customer service had taken its toll, though she'd never admit it. "I can finish the last of the unpacking tomorrow," Mack offered, noting her suppressed yawn. "No need," Lucy insisted. "We should complete it today." "Miss Montgomery," Mack said gently, "the crates aren't going anywhere and you look ready to drop. A good business owner knows when to rest." Lucy opened her mouth as if to argue, then sighed. "Perhaps you're right. We've accomplished enough for one day." As they closed up the store, a tall, well-dressed man entered just as Lucy was about to lock the door. "I'm sorry, sir, we're closing," she began, then stopped abruptly. "Mr. Hargrove." "Miss Montgomery," the man replied with exaggerated politeness. "I see you're still playing at shopkeeper." Mack noticed Lucy's spine stiffen. "The bank closed an hour ago, Mr. Hargrove. If you have business with me, it will have to wait until tomorrow." "Oh, this won't take long," Hargrove said, removing his gloves deliberately. "I've come with another offer for your establishment, given your situation. I think you'll find it most generous." Lucy's face had gone pale. "My answer remains the same. The store is not for sale." "Be reasonable, my dear. A young woman alone can't possibly maintain a business of this size." My father would have wanted me to preserve his legacy," Lucy interrupted, her voice tight. "Now if you'll excuse me, we're closed." Hargrove's gaze shifted to Mack, noticing him for the first time. "I see you've hired help, another drifter." "You should be more careful, Miss Montgomery. The last man you trusted with your business left you in quite a predicament." Mack saw Lucy flinch as if physically struck, and something protective rose in him. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Lucy and Hargrove. "The lady asked you to leave," he said quietly, but with unmistakable firmness. Hargrove assessed Mack, evidently deciding this confrontation wasn't worth pursuing. "Very well. But my offer stands until the end of the month, Miss Montgomery. After that, I can't guarantee the bank will be so accommodating about your loan payments." After Hargrove left, Lucy locked the door with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said without looking at Mack. "That will be all for today." "Miss Montgomery, if you're in trouble with the bank, that's none of your concern," she snapped, then immediately looked regretful. "I apologize, it's been a long day." Mack hesitated, then nodded. "I'll see you tomorrow morning. Regular time?" "Yes, 7 o'clock." Lucy seemed to make a decision. "Mr. Sullivan, how long do you plan to stay in Willow Creek?" The question caught him off guard. "I hadn't given it much thought. Why do you ask?" "I need to know if you're reliable long-term. There's more work coming up." "Seasonal orders, building improvements." Mack studied her face, understanding what she wasn't saying. She needed someone dependable, someone who wouldn't leave her in the lurch like others had. "I have no immediate plans to move on," he said truthfully. "As long as there's work, I'm content to stay." Relief flickered across her features. "Good, that's practical." After Mack left, Lucy sat alone in her office above the store, staring at the ledger books without really seeing them. The encounter with Hargrove had rattled her more than she cared to admit. The banker had been pressuring her to sell since the day after Randall disappeared, making increasingly less subtle threats about calling in her father's loan. What Hargrove didn't know, what no one knew, was how close she was to losing everything. The money Randall had stolen had been earmarked for the biannual loan payment. Lucy had been working frantically to rebuild those funds, but she was still several $100s short, and the deadline was approaching in just 3 weeks. Her gaze fell on the small package Mack had handed her earlier. Opening it revealed a set of fancy hair combs she'd ordered months ago, when she still believed she would become Mrs. Randall Thompson. They seemed to mock her now, these relics of a future that would never be. Lucy put the combs away in a drawer and returned to her ledgers. She would find a way to save her father's store. She had to. Because if she lost it, she would have nothing left, no legacy, no livelihood, and no reason to stay in Willow Creek. And for some reason, the thought of leaving troubled her more tonight than it ever had before. 2 weeks passed, settling into a steady rhythm at Montgomery's general store. Each morning, Mack arrived precisely at 7, sometimes finding Lucy already there, sometimes arriving just as she unlocked the doors. They worked well together, falling into an efficient partnership that allowed the store to run more smoothly than it had in months. Mack noticed small things about Lucy that intrigued him: how she always remembered customers' names and their usual purchases, how she was unfailingly patient with children and the elderly but brisk with those who tried to take advantage of her, how she kept a small notebook in her apron pocket where she jotted observations about inventory and sales patterns. He also noticed how she checked the calendar with increasing frequency, how her shoulders tensed whenever the mail arrived, and how she stayed later each evening, poring over the account books with a worried frown. On this particular evening, Mack was finishing a delivery list for the next day when he heard a sound from Lucy's small office, something between a sigh and a stifled sob. Without thinking, he approached the partially open door and knocked gently. "Miss Montgomery, is everything all right?" There was a rustle of papers, then Lucy's voice, strained but controlled. "Yes, quite all right. You can go, Mr. Sullivan. I'll see you tomorrow." Instead of leaving, Mack pushed the door open slightly. Lucy sat at her desk, surrounded by ledgers and papers, looking more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "I don't mean to intrude," he said carefully, "but it seems like something's troubling you." Lucy started to offer another denial, then seemed to deflate slightly. "It's nothing you can help with. Maybe, maybe not, but sometimes talking about a problem makes it clearer." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his trustworthiness. Finally, she gestured to the chair across from her desk. "My father took out a loan 5 years ago to expand the store," she began once Mack was seated. "It's a substantial amount with biannual payments. The next payment is due in 1 week, and I'm short by $300. Mack whistled softly. $300 was a significant sum. "And if you can't make the payment, Mr. Hargrove has made it clear he'll foreclose immediately, despite the fact that my father was a founding member of this community and paid faithfully for years." Lucy's voice held controlled anger. "He's wanted this property for his own ventures for a long time." "You mentioned your fiancé, former fiancé," Lucy corrected sharply. "Randall absconded with nearly $500 of store funds, including the money set aside for this payment. Have the authorities tried to find him?" Lucy laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Brooks sent some telegrams, but Randall's long gone, probably in California by now or Canada." Mack leaned forward. "Have you considered taking on a partner, someone to invest?" "I've considered everything," Lucy said wearily. "But I won't sell even a portion of what my father built. This store is all I have left of him, and I won't share it with some investor who sees it only as profit margins and inventory turnover." "What about increasing sales before the deadline?" "I've tried. Extended hours, special promotions." "It's helped, but not enough." Lucy rubbed her temples. "The frustrating thing is that the store is profitable. If I could just get past this payment, I'd be fine until the next one, and by then I'd have built up sufficient reserves." Mack was silent for a moment, thinking. "What about the spring cattle drives? They're due to start coming through soon, aren't they?" Lucy looked up, a flicker of interest in her eyes. "Yes, the first one should arrive next week, but they usually bypass the town, making camp at the river crossing. The Cowboys come in for supplies, but it's never amounted to significant business." "Because they don't know what you offer," Mack said, an idea forming. "Most trail bosses buy supplies in bulk before they start out, then supplement along the way. If they knew you could provide quality goods at competitive prices, they might bring more business your way." "And how would they know that?" Lucy asked skeptically. "By someone telling them," Mack replied simply. "I worked cattle drives for years. I know how trail bosses think, what they need, what problems they encounter by the time they reach this part of the territory. If I rode out to meet the drives before they make camp, I could convince them to route their supply purchases through Montgomery's." Lucy stared at him, hope and suspicion warring in her expression. "Why would you go to such trouble for me? For this store?" The question caught Mack off guard. Why indeed? He'd come to Willow Creek with no intention of staying, yet here he was, 2 weeks later, proposing schemes to save a store that wasn't his, for a woman who barely trusted him. "I respect what you've built here," he said finally. "And I dislike men like Hargrove who use their power to take advantage of others." Lucy studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Mr. Sullivan, we'll try your plan, but if it fails—" "It won't," Mack promised, with more confidence than he felt. "I'll ride out tomorrow to scout the approaching drives." As he left the store that night, Mack wondered what had possessed him to make such a promise. He'd planned to move on from Willow Creek soon, continuing his restless journey. Now he'd committed himself to saving Lucy Montgomery's store and possibly her future. What troubled him most wasn't the challenge itself, but the realization that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, Lucy's problems had become his problems, her struggle his own. And that was dangerous territory for a man who'd learned the hard way that attachments only led to pain. The next morning, Lucy waited anxiously for Mack's arrival, half expecting him not to show up at all. Their conversation the previous evening had revealed more of her troubles than she'd intended, and experience had taught her that men tended to disappear when difficulties arose. To her surprise, Mack arrived earlier than usual, dressed for riding and carrying a rolled-up map. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said without preamble. "The first cattle drive should be approaching Falcon Creek, about 15 miles south. If I leave now, I can intercept them before they choose their camp location." Lucy was momentarily speechless at his preparedness. "You've clearly given this some thought." "It seemed prudent," Mack replied, unrolling the map on the counter. "I've marked the most likely routes the drives will take. With your permission, I'd like to prepare a list of your inventory and prices for the trail bosses." For the next hour, they worked together on creating a comprehensive list of supplies that would appeal to cattle drives, everything from tobacco and coffee to liniment for saddle sores and replacement tools. Lucy was impressed by Mack's practical knowledge of trail needs and his understanding of competitive pricing. "This might actually work," she admitted as they finished. "It will work," Mack said confidently. "Trail bosses are practical men. If you can save them money and provide quality goods, they'll come." As Mack prepared to leave, Lucy hesitated, then said, "Mr. Sullivan, I appreciate your help with this. It's more than I expected." Something flickered in his blue eyes, surprise perhaps, or something deeper. "Just doing my job, Miss Montgomery." "This goes well beyond your job," Lucy pointed out. Mack shrugged, adjusting his hat. "Let's see if it works before we call it anything more than an idea." After he rode off, Lucy returned to the store, finding it strangely empty without his steady presence. In just 2 weeks, she'd grown accustomed to having him nearby, his quiet competence a reassuring constant in her uncertain world. Jessie arrived for her shift, immediately noticing Mack's absence. "Where's Mr. Sullivan today?" "He's gone to intercept the cattle drives," Lucy explained. "To see if we can secure more business." Jessie's eyebrows rose. "That's mighty helpful of him. Most men wouldn't go to such trouble." "He's just being practical," Lucy said quickly. "More business means secure employment for him." "If you say so," Jessie replied with a knowing smile that Lucy chose to ignore throughout the day. Lucy found herself glancing repeatedly at the clock, calculating how far Mack might have traveled, wondering if he'd found the cattle drive yet. It irritated her to realize how much she was counting on his plan to succeed, not just for the store's sake, but because she didn't want to see the disappointment in his eyes if it failed. When had Mack Sullivan's opinion begun to matter to her? The thought was unsettling. Evening came with no sign of Mack's return. Lucy closed the store, trying to quell her growing anxiety. He'd mentioned the possibility of being gone overnight if the drive was farther than expected, but still, she worried. Not just about the plan, she admitted to herself, but about him riding alone in territory known for occasional bandit attacks and unpredictable weather. The next morning dawned clear and bright, but Lucy's mood remained clouded with concern. She opened the store earlier than usual, hoping for news. By mid-morning, her nerves were stretched thin, and even Jessie had stopped trying to make conversation. Just after noon, the sound of approaching horses drew Lucy to the front window. Her heart leaped at the sight of Mack riding down the main street, accompanied by a weather-beaten man who could only be a trail boss. Judging by his authoritative posture and the respect shown by the 3 cowboys following behind. Lucy smoothed her skirts and checked her hair quickly before the men entered the store. Mack's face lit up when he saw her, a genuine smile that transformed his usually reserved features. Miss Montgomery, he called as he entered, may I present Mr. Frank Dahlan, trail boss for the Bar X Ranch. He's bringing 2,000 head of cattle through the territory and is interested in restocking his supplies. Frank Dahlan removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair and a deeply tanned face. Miss Montgomery. Your man here has convinced me that your establishment might save me considerable money compared to what I'd pay in Cheyenne. Your man. The phrase sent an unexpected warmth through Lucy, though she was quick to correct it mentally. Not her man, her employee, Mr. Dahlan, she greeted him with her most professional smile. I believe you'll find our prices fair and our selection comprehensive. Mr. Sullivan can help you with your list while I prepare the paperwork. For the next several hours, the store bustled with activity as Dahlan and his men selected supplies. Lucy worked efficiently alongside Mack, noting how well they anticipated each other's movements in the confined space behind the counter. When their hands occasionally brushed in passing, she felt a jolt that had nothing to do with static electricity and everything to do with the growing awareness of him as more than just an employee. By the time Dahlan and his men left, promising to send the rest of their hands in smaller groups over the next day, the store had made more profit in a single afternoon than in the previous week combined. That was. Lucy began, then laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. That was remarkable, Mr. Sullivan. Mack leaned against the counter, fatigue evident in his posture but satisfaction in his eyes. And that's just the first drive. I spoke with 2 other trail bosses who are a day or 2 behind. They've agreed to at least come look at what you offer. Impulsively, Lucy reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you, truly. Mack looked down at their joined hands, and Lucy suddenly realized what she'd done. She started to pull away, but to her surprise, Mack turned his hand to briefly clasp hers. You're welcome, he said softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Then the bell above the door jingled as a customer entered, breaking the spell. Lucy withdrew her hand, feeling strangely bereft. You must be exhausted. Why don't you take the rest of the day off? I can handle things here. Are you sure? Mack asked. Those cowboys will be coming in groups all evening. I've managed busy evenings before, Lucy assured him. Get some rest. Tomorrow may be even busier. As Mack left, Lucy found herself watching his retreating figure longer than necessary. For the first time since Randall's betrayal, perhaps for the first time ever, she was beginning to wonder if there might be men in the world who kept their promises, who didn't disappear when difficulties arose. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity as cowboys from all 3 cattle drives flowed through Montgomery's general store. Lucy barely had time to breathe, let alone worry about the approaching loan payment deadline. Mack worked tirelessly alongside her, often staying well past closing time to restock shelves and prepare for the next day's onslaught. On the evening of the 3rd day, after the last customer had finally departed, Lucy collapsed into a chair behind the counter, her feet aching and her voice hoarse from hours of conversation. I never thought I'd say this, she admitted, but I'm almost looking forward to the drives moving on. Mack chuckled as he swept the floor. They'll be gone by tomorrow afternoon. Trail bosses don't like to linger too long, makes the cattle restless and the men too comfortable. Lucy watched him work, appreciating the easy grace with which he moved. In just over 2 weeks, Mack Sullivan had become indispensable to her business, and though she was reluctant to admit it to her peace of mind. Mr. Sullivan, she began hesitantly, I haven't properly thanked you for what you've done. Your idea has been transformative. Mack paused in his sweeping, leaning on the broom handle. Have you counted the receipts yet? Not the final tally, but we've made well over $300 in profit these past 3 days. Lucy couldn't keep the wonder from her voice. The loan payment is secure with some to spare. I'm glad, Mack said simply, but his eyes conveyed deeper satisfaction. Lucy took a deep breath. I'd like to offer you a bonus. 10% of the profits from the cattle drive seems fair. Mack shook his head. That's not necessary. It is, Lucy insisted. This was your idea, your expertise. You deserve to share in its success. Miss Montgomery Lucy, Mack said, using her first name for the first time. I didn't do this for money. The sound of her name on his lips sent a shiver through her. Why did you do it then? Mack set the broom aside and approached the counter, his expression unusually open. Because I couldn't stand the thought of you losing something you loved to a man like Hargrove. Because I've spent my life moving from place to place, never fighting for anything or anyone, and it felt good to take a stand. Because he trailed off and Lucy found herself holding her breath, waiting for him to continue. Because I care what happens to you, he finished quietly. More than I should, perhaps. The words hung in the air between them, an admission neither had expected. Lucy felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble under the sincerity in his gaze. Mr. Sullivan Mack, she corrected herself, tasting the unfamiliarity of his given name. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Mack assured her. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just wanted you to know that my help wasn't about money or obligation. Lucy nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. It's getting late, she said, retreating behind professionalism. We should both get some rest. Tomorrow we'll be busy. Mack accepted the change of subject gracefully. Of course. Good night, Miss Montgomery. As he reached the door, Lucy called after him. Mack, if you like, you can call me Lucy. When we're alone, that is. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and did something peculiar to her heartbeat. Good night, Lucy. After he left, Lucy sank back into the chair, her emotions in turmoil. For 3 years, she'd held herself apart from any possibility of romantic entanglement, protecting her heart behind walls of independence and distrust. Now those walls were developing cracks, and the most frightening part was that she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to repair them. The next morning, Lucy woke earlier than usual, taking extra care with her appearance before heading to the store. She told herself it was simply professional pride. The final wave of cowboys would be coming through today, and she wanted to make a good impression for the sake of future business. But the flutter in her stomach when she saw Mack already waiting at the store's back entrance told a different story. You're early, she observed, trying to sound casual as she unlocked the door. Thought you might need help preparing for the rush, Mack replied, following her inside. The last group is always the most demanding. They've heard from their friends about what's available and come with specific requests. Lucy nodded, busying herself with lighting lamps to hide the blush that had risen to her cheeks. Something had shifted between them last night, and in the clear light of morning, she wasn't sure how to navigate this new terrain. Fortunately, the day's business provided ample distraction. By mid-morning, the store was packed with cowboys making last-minute purchases before the drive continued northward. Lucy and Mack worked in tandem, serving customers with an efficiency born of growing familiarity with each other's habits. Just before noon, the door opened to admit Hargrove, the banker, his usual smug expression faltering as he took in the crowded store and bustling activity. Miss Montgomery, he said, making his way to the counter. I see business is improved. Indeed it is, Mr. Hargrove, Lucy replied calmly. How may I help you today? Hargrove straightened his already immaculate lapels. I've come about the loan payment due tomorrow. I wanted to remind you that won't be necessary, Lucy interrupted, opening the cash drawer and removing an envelope. I have the payment right here in full. Would you like to count it? Surprise and disappointment flashed across Hargrove's face as Lucy handed him the envelope containing the exact amount due. He opened it, quickly verifying the contents before tucking it into his inside pocket. Well, he said, clearly discomfited. This is unexpected. Not really, Lucy replied. Montgomery's has always been a profitable business. We simply had a temporary setback. Hargrove's gaze shifted to Mack, who was assisting a customer nearby but clearly keeping an eye on their interaction. I see you found reliable help. How fortunate. Yes, Mr. Sullivan has been an invaluable addition to our operation. Lucy emphasized the word "our" deliberately. I hope he plans to stay, Hargrove said, his tone suggesting the opposite. Men like him tend to drift on when things get complicated. Lucy felt a flash of anger at the insinuation. Mr. Sullivan's plans are his own business. Now, if there's nothing else, I have customers waiting. After Hargrove departed, visibly disgruntled, Mack approached the counter. Everything all right? Perfectly, Lucy said, unable to suppress a triumphant smile. I've just paid the loan installment a full day early. Hargrove looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Mack chuckled. I noticed. Congratulations, Lucy. You've earned this victory. We've earned it, she corrected. I couldn't have done it without you. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the busy store faded away. Then a customer called for assistance, breaking the moment. By late afternoon, the last of the Cowboys had made their purchases and departed, leaving the store eerily quiet after days of constant activity. Lucy and Mack stood amid the depleted shelves, surveying the aftermath. We'll need to reorder almost everything, Lucy noted, making entries in her inventory book. But it's a good problem to have. The best kind, Mack agreed, beginning to straighten the remaining merchandise. Will you do anything special with the extra profits? Lucy considered the question. Some will go toward building up a reserve for the next loan payment. The rest. I've been thinking about expanding the dry goods section. More fabrics, patterns, notions. The ladies of Willow Creek currently have to order such things from catalogs or travel to Cheyenne. Sounds like a smart business move, Mack said approvingly. Lucy hesitated, then added, I'd like your opinion on some other improvements I've been considering, when you have time, of course. I have time now, Mack offered. For the next hour, they discussed potential changes to the store, reorganizing departments, adding new product lines, improving the delivery system. Lucy found herself increasingly impressed by Mack's practical suggestions and business acumen. You know a great deal about retail for a cattle driver, she observed as they finished. Mack's expression grew distant. My father owned a hardware store back in Missouri before the war. I grew up in it, learning the trade, had plans to take it over someday. Lucy sensed there was more to the story. What happened? War happened. I enlisted, spent 4 years fighting. When I came home, he paused, his jaw tightening. Everything was gone. The store, my parents' yellow fever took them both while I was away. I couldn't stand to stay in a town full of memories, so I headed west. Been moving ever since. I'm sorry, Lucy said softly, understanding now the shadows that sometimes darkened his eyes. That explains why you're so good at this work. It's in your blood. Mack nodded, seemingly relieved by her matter-of-fact response to his revelation. I suppose it is. Never thought I'd find myself back behind a counter, though. Do you miss it? Lucy asked. The traveling, I mean. Sometimes, Mack admitted. The open country, new horizons. There's a freedom in it, but lately. He glanced around the store, his gaze lingering on Lucy. Lately, I've been thinking there might be something to be said for staying in one place, if it's the right place. The implication in his words sent a warm current through Lucy's veins. Before she could respond, the bell above the door jangled, announcing a late customer. The moment passed, leaving Lucy to wonder what she would have said if they hadn't been interrupted. Later that evening, as she prepared to lock up, Lucy made a decision that both terrified and exhilarated her. Mack, she said, using his given name deliberately, would you join me for supper tonight, to celebrate our success? My Aunt Martha is visiting her sister in Cheyenne, so I'm alone at the house, but I can prepare something simple. Mack looked surprised, then pleased. I'd be honored, Lucy. Shall I bring anything? Just yourself, she replied, her courage faltering slightly now that the invitation was issued. Around 7, as Mack left to clean up before supper, Lucy hurried home to prepare the meal, her mind racing with doubts and anticipation. Was she being too forward? Would he think she was offering more than a simple meal? Did she want to offer more? These questions circled in her mind as she changed into a fresh dress, the blue one that brought out the color of her eyes, and prepared a simple but hearty meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread from the bakery. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Lucy took a deep breath, smoothed her skirts, and went to welcome Mack Sullivan into her home and perhaps, though she scarcely dared admit it, into her carefully guarded heart. Mack stood on Lucy's porch, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. He'd changed into his best shirt, shaved carefully, and even purchased a small bouquet of wildflowers from a street vendor, an impulse that now seemed presumptuous as he waited for her to answer the door. When Lucy appeared, Mack momentarily lost his capacity for speech. Away from the store, with her hair styled more softly and wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, she looked younger, less guarded, beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten. "Good evening," he finally managed, offering the flowers awkwardly. "These are for you." As a thank you for the invitation, Lucy accepted the bouquet, a genuine smile lighting her features. "They're lovely. Thank you, please come in." The Montgomery home was modest but well-appointed, reflecting the same practical elegance that characterized Lucy herself. The dining room table was set for two, with candles and what appeared to be the good china. "It smells wonderful," Mack said, following Lucy into the kitchen where she was arranging the flowers in a vase. "Just a simple meal," Lucy replied, though the spread she'd prepared was far from simple by Mack's standards. "I hope you're hungry." "Starving," Mack admitted. "We were so busy today, I don't think I ate more than a biscuit at breakfast." They settled at the table, and after a moment of awkward silence, fell into conversation about the day's events, the success of the cattle drive strategy, and plans for restocking the store. Shop talk was safe territory, allowing them both to relax gradually. As they finished the meal, Lucy poured coffee and served apple pie still warm from the oven. "You mentioned your father's store in Missouri," she said. "Was it similar to Montgomery's?" "Smaller, more specialized in hardware and farming implements," Mack replied. "But my father had the same philosophy as yours seems to have had: fair prices, quality goods, service that made customers feel valued." "It's a good philosophy," Lucy agreed, "though not always easy to maintain when you're competing with larger operations or catalogs." "True. But there's something a store like yours offers that catalogs can't: immediate gratification, personal service, the ability to see and touch what you're buying." Mack sipped his coffee. "And community. A good store becomes part of the town's heartbeat." Lucy's expression softened. "That's exactly how I've always felt about it. My father used to say we weren't just selling goods, we were providing what people needed to build their lives here." "A wise man," Mack observed. "You're a lot like him, I imagine." "In some ways," Lucy acknowledged, "though he was more trusting than I am, more willing to see the good in people." Mack set down his cup. "And you're not," Lucy hesitated. "I used to be, but experience has taught me to be cautious." "Because of your fiancé, the one who stole from you." Lucy's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Randall was the third, actually, the third man who made promises he didn't keep." Mack raised his eyebrows, surprised. "3. The first was a boy I loved when I was 18. John Winters. He swore he'd wait for me while I cared for my father during his illness. He lasted 6 months, before leaving for California with a saloon singer." Lucy's voice was steady, but Mack could hear the old pain beneath the words. "The second was William Chambers, a lawyer who courted me for nearly a year after my father's death. He asked me to marry him, then disappeared the night before our wedding. I later learned he was already married with a family in Denver." "And then Randall," Mack said quietly. Lucy nodded. "Randall Thompson, a supposedly respectable businessman who managed the store while we were engaged. He convinced me to put off the wedding 3 times, always with reasonable excuses. Meanwhile, he was systematically siphoning money from the business, planning his escape. The night he left, he told me that no woman was worth waiting for, that I was a fool to think any man would be patient enough to build a life with me." The bitterness in her voice made Mack want to find this Randall and introduce him to the business end of a bullwhip. Instead, he reached across the table and covered Lucy's hand with his own. "He was wrong," Mack said simply. "About all of it, but especially about you." Lucy met his gaze, vulnerability evident in her eyes. "Was he?" "3 men, Mack. 3 men who couldn't or wouldn't wait for me, who found it easier to leave than to stay. That suggests a pattern, and the common factor is me. Or it suggests you've had the misfortune to encounter 3 men of poor character and questionable judgment," Mack countered. "Their failures don't reflect on you, Lucy." Lucy withdrew her hand gently. "That's kind of you to say, but it's left me cautious. I told myself after Randall that I was done with men and their promises, that I would focus on the store and stop expecting anyone to wait for me to choose me. Mack understood then the depth of her walls, the reasons for her initial coldness and continuing wariness. She'd been abandoned repeatedly by men who had promised to stay, to wait, to be patient. No wonder she'd been skeptical of his reliability, his punctuality, his willingness to help. "Lucy," he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "Not every man is like those three. Some of us understand that anything worthwhile requires patience." A shadow of hope flickered across her face before she masked it with practicality. "Perhaps, but I've learned to rely on myself. It's safer that way." They finished their dessert in thoughtful silence. As Mack helped Lucy clear the table, their hands brushed repeatedly in the confined space of her kitchen, each contact sending sparks of awareness through him. He found himself studying the curve of her neck as she washed dishes, the way a tendril of hair had escaped her careful styling to curl against her cheek. When the kitchen was tidy, they stood awkwardly, neither quite ready for the evening to end. "Would you like to sit on the porch for a while?" Lucy offered. "It's a lovely evening." Outside, the spring night was indeed beautiful, stars emerging in a velvet sky as crickets began their evening chorus. They sat side by side on the porch swing, not touching but close enough that Mack could detect the faint lavender scent of Lucy's soap. "Thank you for supper," Mack said. "Best meal I've had in longer than I can remember." "You're welcome," Lucy replied. "It was nice to cook for someone besides myself. Aunt Martha is often away visiting relatives and I don't entertain much." "Their loss," Mack said sincerely. "You're an excellent cook," Lucy smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Flattery, Mr. Sullivan. Just the truth, Miss Montgomery." They fell silent again, the swing creaking gently as they rocked. After a while, Lucy spoke softly. "Will you stay in Willow Creek, Mack?" Now that the excitement of the cattle drives is over, the question held more weight than its simple words suggested. Mack considered his answer carefully. "I'd like to," he said finally, "if there's a reason to stay." Lucy turned to face him, moonlight silvering her features. "The store will need help with regular deliveries, stock management, especially if we expand as discussed. It would be steady employment." "Is that the only reason you'd want me to stay?" Mack asked, his voice low. Lucy's breath caught audibly. "What other reason would there be?" Mack moved his hand to cover hers on the swing between them. "I think you know, Lucy." Her fingers trembled beneath his, but she didn't pull away. "Mack, I'm not sure I can trust this, trust what I'm feeling." "I understand," he said gently. "After what you've been through, caution makes sense. I'm not asking for promises or declarations, just time. Time to show you that some men do wait, do stay." Lucy's eyes searched his face in the moonlight. "And if I can't ever believe that, if I can't get past my doubts, then I'll still have had the privilege of knowing you," Mack said simply. "Of working alongside you, of seeing you triumph over men like Hargrove and memories like Randall." A tear slipped down Lucy's cheek, catching the moonlight like a diamond. Without thinking, Mack reached up to brush it away with his thumb, his hand lingering against her face. "May I kiss you, Lucy?" he asked softly. She hesitated only a moment before nodding, and Mack leaned forward to press his lips gently against hers. The kiss was brief, tender, a question rather than a demand. When he pulled back, Lucy's eyes remained closed for a heartbeat longer, as if savoring the moment. "I should go," Mack said reluctantly. "It's getting late." Lucy nodded, rising from the swing. "Will I see you tomorrow at the store?" 7 o'clock sharp, Mack promised with a smile. "We have shelves to restock, remember?" As he walked back to his rented room, Mack realized he'd made a decision without consciously choosing it. He would stay in Willow Creek. He would give Lucy Montgomery all the time she needed to trust again, to believe that a man could wait for her without complaint or abandonment. And he would do it gladly, for as long as it took. Summer arrived in Wyoming territory with blazing heat and occasional violent thunderstorms. In the 3 months since the cattle drives had passed through, Montgomery's general store had flourished under Lucy and Mack's joint management. The expanded dry goods section had proven particularly successful, drawing female customers from outlying ranches and neighboring settlements. Lucy found herself happier than she'd been in years. The store was thriving, her financial worries had eased, and each day brought new opportunities for growth and improvement. But the greatest change was in her personal life, the cautious, evolving relationship with Mack Sullivan. True to his word, Mack had been unfailingly reliable. Each morning he arrived promptly, often with fresh ideas for the business. Each evening he walked Lucy home, sometimes staying for supper, sometimes just lingering on the porch swing for conversation. Their kisses had grown more frequent, more confident, but Mack never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. On this particular evening in late July, they were closing the store after a busy day when Sheriff Brooks entered, his expression serious. "Miss Montgomery, Mr. Sullivan," he greeted them. "Got some news you should hear." Lucy tensed. "What is it, Sheriff?" "Randall Thompson's been arrested in Denver," Brooks announced, "for fraud and embezzlement. Seems you weren't the only one he stole from." Lucy gripped the counter for support, a storm of emotions washing over her. Relief, vindication, and unexpectedly, a sense of closure. "Will he be brought back here to face charges?" Mack asked, moving to stand supportively beside Lucy. "That's what I wanted to discuss," Brooks replied. "Denver authorities are asking if you want to press charges, Miss Montgomery. If so, you'd need to travel there to testify." Lucy considered the implications. Traveling to Denver would mean leaving the store for at least a week, possibly longer. It would mean facing Randall again, reliving the humiliation of his betrayal. "I need to think about it," she said finally. After the sheriff left, Mack turned to Lucy. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you want to go to Denver, I can manage things here." Lucy studied his face, still amazed sometimes by the steadfast support he offered without question. "You do that. Run the store alone while I'm gone." "Of course," Mack said simply. "The store is your priority, so it's mine too." Later that night, as they sat on Lucy's porch discussing the situation, she made her decision. "I'm not going to Denver," she announced. "Pressing charges won't recover the money and it won't change what happened. I'd rather focus on the future than revisit the past." Mack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Are you sure? It might provide some closure." Lucy reached for his hand, a gesture that had become natural over the months. "I don't need Denver to give me closure. I've found it here in what we've built together." "Randall's actions don't have power over me anymore." Mack squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Lucy. Not many could move forward so gracefully after such betrayal." "I've had help," Lucy acknowledged softly. "You've shown me that not all men break their promises." Mack's expression grew serious. "Lucy, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, the store's doing well enough now that you could hire additional help," Mack began. "I've been thinking that might free me up to pursue another opportunity." Lucy felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. After all these months, was Mack leaving too? Had she been a fool to trust again? What opportunity? She managed to ask, her voice tight. "The Wilkinson property at the edge of town is for sale," Mack continued. "It's a good location for a hardware store, specialized, not competing directly with Montgomery's, but complementary. I've been saving my wages, and with a small loan I could purchase it." Lucy stared at him, processing his words. "You want to open your own store, here in Willow Creek?" Mack nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been thinking about it for weeks. It would mean putting down roots, making a commitment to this town, to a future here." "With your own business," Lucy said, understanding dawning, not leaving establishing himself permanently. "Yes, but not just the business." Mack took both her hands in his. "Lucy, I love you. I have for months now. I want to build a life here with you if you'll have me." Lucy's breath caught. Despite their growing closeness, neither had spoken of love until this moment. "Are you proposing?" she asked, scarcely daring to believe it. "Not yet," Mack replied honestly. "I want to establish myself first, prove I can provide a stable future, but I am asking if you might consider the possibility someday. If you might allow yourself to believe that I'm not going anywhere, that I'll wait for as long as it takes for you to trust in us completely." Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. "Mack, I love you too. I think I have almost from the beginning, though I fought against it with everything I had." Mack's face lit with joy. "Then you'll consider a future together." "Yes," Lucy whispered. "But Mack, you don't need to prove anything more to me. You've already shown me every day for months that you're a man who keeps his word, who stays when things are difficult, who waits without complaint. Mack brought her hands to his lips, kissing each one tenderly. Even so, I want to do this right. I want us to build something solid together, something that can withstand any challenge. As Mack pulled her into his arms, Lucy felt the last of her protective walls crumble. She had spent so long believing that no man would ever wait for her, ever choose her above convenience or ambition. Yet here was Mack Sullivan, who had proven his constancy day after day, who wanted to build not just a business but a life in Willow Creek with her. In his embrace, Lucy finally allowed herself to believe in the possibility of lasting happiness, of a love that would neither abandon nor betray her. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, this act of faith, this choice to trust again. But as Mack's lips found hers beneath the star-filled Wyoming sky, Lucy knew with absolute certainty that some men were indeed worth the risk. Autumn painted Willow Creek in russets and golds, the cottonwoods along the creek shedding their leaves in bright drifts that swirled in the crisp October breeze. 6 months had passed since Mack's declaration of love, 6 months of steady progress toward the future they both envisioned. Mack had purchased the Wilkinson property and spent the summer renovating it into a proper hardware store, working evenings and Sundays while still helping Lucy at Montgomery's during regular business hours. The town had watched this development with interest, most approving of the handsome newcomer's industry and commitment, though a few still wagered he wouldn't stay the winter. Lucy had heard the whispers. Of course, Willow Creek was too small for secrets, but they no longer troubled her as they once might have. She had seen Mack's dedication firsthand, had watched him rebuild the Wilkinson place board by board, had witnessed his growing involvement in town affairs. This was not a man preparing to leave. On this particular Sunday afternoon, Lucy was helping Mack arrange the final displays in Sullivan's Hardware and Supply, which was set to open officially the following week. The store smelled of fresh cut wood, paint, and the particular metallic scent of new tools, a masculine counterpart to the more varied aromas of Montgomery's. "What do you think?" Mack asked, surveying the nearly completed interior. "Will Willow Creek approve?" Lucy smiled, admiring the neat rows of tools, the well-organized hardware bins, the specially designed racks for larger equipment. "They'll more than approve. They'll wonder how they managed without a proper hardware store all these years." Mack came to stand beside her, his arms slipping naturally around her waist. Such gestures had become comfortable between them, though they remained careful of propriety in public. Willow Creek might be a frontier town, but it still held to certain standards of decorum. "I couldn't have done it without you," Mack said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Your business sense saved me from at least a dozen costly mistakes." "Partners help each other," Lucy replied simply. It was true they had become partners in every sense except the legal one, consulting each other on business decisions, sharing ideas and resources. Montgomery's now stocked fewer hardware items, referring customers to Sullivan's for specialized tools, while Mack sent his customers to Lucy for general merchandise. "Speaking of partnership," Mack said, his tone shifting to something more serious, "there's something I'd like to show you." He led her to the back of the store, where a door opened into what would serve as his office. Inside, Lucy was surprised to see not just a desk and filing cabinet, but a comfortable settee, a small bookshelf filled with volumes, and a pot-bellied stove for heating. "This is lovely, Mack. More comfortable than most business offices I've seen." "That's because it's not just an office," Mack explained, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "It's also a parlor of sorts. The door in the corner leads to living quarters, a bedroom, small kitchen, and washroom." Lucy looked at him questioningly. "You're planning to live here, above the store?" "Only temporarily," Mack replied. "I've been saving for something more permanent." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document which he handed to Lucy. She opened it to find a deed for a plot of land just outside town, near the creek, 10 acres of prime property with southern exposure and good water access. "You bought land," she said softly, understanding the significance. Mack nodded. "For a home, Lucy, our home, if you'll have me." Before she could respond, Mack dropped to one knee before her, reaching again into his pocket to produce a small velvet box. Lucy Montgomery, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. I promised I would wait for as long as it took for you to believe in us. I hope that time has come, because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a ring with a single perfect diamond flanked by smaller emeralds that matched her eyes. Lucy's hand flew to her mouth, tears blurring her vision. Oh, Mac, she whispered. For a moment, old fears threatened to surface memories of previous proposals, previous disappointments. But they were quickly overwhelmed by the evidence of Mac's constancy. The store he had built, the land he had purchased, the months of patient devotion. Yes, Lucy said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I will marry you, Mack Sullivan. Joy illuminated Mac's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms. His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that left Lucy breathless. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I will spend the rest of my life proving that some men do wait, do stay, do keep their promises. I believe you, Lucy said, and the wonder of it was that she truly did. I trust you, Mac, with my heart, with my future, with everything. As they left the store hand in hand to share their news with Aunt Martha and the rest of Willow Creek, Lucy glanced down at the ring sparkling on her finger, tangible proof of a promise that, for the first time in her life, she fully believed would be kept. The winter of 1875-1876 was one of the coldest in Wyoming Territory's memory, with blizzards that isolated Willow Creek for weeks at a time and temperatures that froze the creek solid. Yet for Lucy, it was a season of warmth and joy unlike any she had known. Planning a spring wedding gave the town something to look forward to through the long, dark months. The ladies of Willow Creek rallied around Lucy, offering advice, helping with preparations, and generally treating the upcoming nuptials as a community event rather than a private celebration. Mac's hardware store thrived despite the harsh weather, becoming a gathering place for the men of the town, who would linger to discuss the latest news or debate territorial politics while warming themselves around the pot-bellied stove. Lucy often stopped by in the late afternoons, ostensibly to walk home with her fiancé, but really to enjoy the easy camaraderie Mac had established with his customers. On this particular February evening, Lucy entered Sullivan's Hardware to find Mac deep in conversation with Henry Wallace, one of the largest ranchers in the area. Afternoon, Miss Montgomery, Wallace greeted her, tipping his hat. Just discussing your wedding with your intended here. The missus is mighty excited about the celebration. Says it's the most romantic thing she's heard in years, how Mr. Sullivan here waited so patient-like for you. Lucy felt her cheeks warm. Your wife is very kind, Mr. Wallace. Kind nothing, she's practical, Wallace chuckled. Says a man who'll wait without complaint before the wedding is the kind who'll stick through thick and thin after. She ought to know we've been married 37 years come June. After Wallace departed, Mac locked the door and turned the sign to closed, ready to head home. It's starting to snow again. Lucy nodded, bundling herself in the fur-lined cloak Mac had given her for Christmas. As they stepped outside, snow was indeed beginning to fall, large flakes drifting lazily in the still air. Beautiful, Lucy murmured, tilting her face upward to feel the cool touch of snowflakes on her skin. Mac's arm circled her waist. Not as beautiful as you, Lucy laughed, the sound crystallizing in the frigid air. Flattery again, Mr. Sullivan. Just the truth, Miss Montgomery, soon to be Mrs. Sullivan. The reminder sent a thrill through Lucy. In less than 2 months, they would be married. The thought still occasionally inspired moments of disbelief, not doubt, but wonder that life could change so dramatically in the space of a year. As they walked through the quiet streets, arm in arm against the cold, Lucy was struck by how far she had come from that bitter, disillusioned woman who had sworn off men entirely. The change wasn't just in her circumstances, but in herself. She had learned to trust again, to hope, to believe in possibilities beyond her previous experience. What are you thinking about? Mac asked, noting her thoughtful expression. About how different everything is from this time last year, Lucy replied honestly. About how close I came to missing us because I was too afraid to take another chance. Mac stopped walking, turning to face her in the gently falling snow. But you did take that chance, Lucy. Despite everything you'd been through, you found the courage to believe again. That's one of the many reasons I love you. He kissed her then, his lips warm despite the cold, and Lucy melted into him, marveling at how safe she felt in his arms, how certain of his devotion. When they reached Lucy's home, they found Aunt Martha entertaining an unexpected visitor, Sheriff Brooks, who rose hastily as they entered, brushing cookie crumbs from his mustache. Miss Montgomery, Sullivan, he greeted them, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. Just stopped by with some news I thought you should hear. Lucy removed her cloak, a sense of foreboding replacing her earlier contentment. What is it, Sheriff? Brooks cleared his throat. Randall Thompson's been released from jail in Denver. Served a few months, got out early for good behavior or some such nonsense. Thought you should know, given your history. Lucy felt Mack tense beside her, his hand finding hers in silent support. Thank you for the warning, Lucy said calmly. Do you think he might come back to Willow Creek? Hard to say, Brooks replied. Denver authorities made it clear he wasn't welcome to stay there. Man's got to go somewhere. After the sheriff departed, having lingered perhaps longer than necessary over Martha's cookies, Lucy sat by the fire, considering this unexpected development. Are you worried? Mack asked, joining her on the settee. Lucy thought about it seriously before answering. Not worried exactly. Randall was a thief and a liar, but not violent, and he has nothing to gain by returning here. The money's long gone, and everyone knows what he did. Still, I don't like the timing, Mack said, his protective instincts evident. With the wedding so close, Lucy squeezed his hand. Randall Thompson has no power over my happiness anymore, Mack. Even if he does return, he can't hurt me now. I've moved beyond him completely. Mack's expression softened. You're an extraordinary woman, Lucy Montgomery, and you're a good man, Mack Sullivan, she replied simply. The best I've ever known. 2 weeks later, Lucy was reviewing supply orders at Montgomery's when the bell above the door jangled. She looked up with her usual welcoming smile, which froze on her face as she recognized the man who entered. Randall Thompson looked thinner than she remembered, his once expensive suit threadbare at the cuffs and collar. But his easy smile remained unchanged as he approached the counter, hat in hand. Hello, Lucy, he said, as if they had parted on good terms just yesterday instead of under the shadow of his theft. You're looking well. Lucy gathered her composure, grateful that Jesse had stepped out to make a delivery. What are you doing here, Randall? Is that any way to greet an old friend? Randall asked, his tone light but his eyes calculating. We're not friends, Lucy stated flatly. You stole from me and disappeared. The sheriff knows you're out of jail, by the way. Randall waved a dismissive hand. Ancient history. I've served my time, made restitution as best I could. I'm here to make a fresh start. Lucy laughed incredulously. In Willow Creek, where everyone knows what you did. People have short memories when it suits them, Randall replied. Besides, I have skills this town needs. I heard Hargrove is looking for someone to manage bank investments. Hargrove, Lucy repeated, understanding dawning. Of course, birds of a feather. Randall's pleasant expression slipped momentarily. I see you still have that sharp tongue. Has it scared away all your suitors yet? Before Lucy could respond, the back door opened and Mack entered, carrying a crate of supplies. He set it down carefully when he saw Randall, his posture straightening as he moved to stand beside Lucy. Mr. Thompson, he said, his voice neutral but his eyes watchful, you're back in town. Randall looked between them, comprehension and surprise flickering across his features. I see. So you found someone new to manage your store, Lucy. I hope you're keeping a closer eye on the accounts this time. Mr. Sullivan is not my employee, Lucy said clearly. He's my fiancé. We're being married in April. Randall's eyebrows rose. Engaged again, you are resilient. Or perhaps just slow to learn. Mack took a step forward, his patience visibly thinning. I think you should leave, Thompson. Miss Montgomery has customers arriving soon. Randall smiled thinly. Of course, I wouldn't want to intrude on your happiness. He turned to go, then paused at the door. Just one question, Lucy. Does your new man know what happened to the others? Does he know what he's getting into with a woman no man has ever waited for? Lucy felt Mack tense beside her, but she placed a restraining hand on his arm. Actually, Randall, that's where you're wrong. Mack has waited for me, patiently and without complaint, through all my doubts and fears, many of which you helped create. He's twice the man you could ever hope to be." Randall's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine emotion, regret, perhaps, or simply recognition of what he had thrown away. "Well then, I wish you both joy of each other." After he left, Lucy released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I'm sorry you had to witness that." Mack turned to her, concern evident in his expression. "Are you all right?" Surprisingly, yes, Lucy replied, and it was true. Seeing Randall again had not reopened old wounds as she might have feared. Instead, it had only highlighted how completely she had moved beyond that chapter of her life. "He seems smaller than I remembered, less significant," Mack nodded, understanding. "Sometimes when we face our fears, we discover they weren't as formidable as we thought." Lucy smiled up at him, love swelling in her heart. "You're very wise, Mr. Sullivan." "Not wise," Mack corrected, drawing her into his arms. "Just experienced in facing down my own ghosts. And Lucy, yes, what you said to him about me waiting for you, that meant everything." Lucy reached up to touch his face, marveling at how this strong, steady man could still be moved by her words. "I meant every word. You've shown me what true patience looks like, what real love can be. I used to believe no man would ever wait for me. You proved me wonderfully, gloriously wrong." The wedding of Lucy Montgomery and Matthew Sullivan took place on a perfect spring day in April 1876, with all of Willow Creek in attendance. The ceremony was held in the town's small church, which overflowed with well-wishers and floral arrangements contributed by every garden in the county. Lucy wore a gown of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, her auburn hair adorned with a crown of spring blossoms. As she walked down the aisle on Sheriff Brooks' arm, the closest thing to a father figure she had, she saw only Mack waiting at the altar, his blue eyes shining with love and promise. The reception that followed was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by every household and enough wedding cake to feed twice the town's population. As the evening progressed, lanterns were lit and a small band played, encouraging dancing that continued well into the night. Lucy and Mack circulated among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes from everyone from the banker Hargrove, who had become notably more cooperative since Sullivan's Hardware opened, to the Cowboys who still remembered how Lucy had stood her ground during their purchases the previous year. "Mrs. Sullivan," called Frank Dahlan, the trail boss whose cattle drive had marked the beginning of Montgomery's revival. "Congratulations on landing the most stubborn cowboy in the territory." Lucy laughed, comfortable now with the good-natured teasing that came with being part of the community. "Thank you, Mr. Dahlan. I consider his stubbornness one of his finest qualities." "As well you should," Dahlan agreed. "Man needs a certain amount of backbone to build something worthwhile, whether it's a cattle herd, a business, or a marriage." As the celebration continued around them, Mack led Lucy away from the crowd, toward the quieter area near the creek. The spring evening was mild, the air scented with blossoms and possibility. "Happy, Mrs. Sullivan?" Mack asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely, Mr. Sullivan," Lucy replied, leaning into his embrace, "though it still sounds strange to hear myself called that." "You'll get used to it," Mack promised. "We have a lifetime for you to practice." Lucy gazed up at the stars emerging in the twilight sky, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought her to this moment. "A year ago, I stood in the store declaring I was done with men and their empty promises. I was so certain I'd never trust anyone again, never believe in love again. And now—" Mack prompted gently. "And now I'm married to a man who has never made a promise he didn't keep," Lucy said softly. "Who has shown me every day what patience and constancy truly mean, who waited for me without complaint until I could believe in us completely." Mack turned her to face him, his expression solemn. "I will continue to show you, Lucy, every day for the rest of our lives. I promise you that." And as he sealed this newest promise with a kiss, Lucy knew with absolute certainty that this was one vow that would never be broken. 5 years later, Lucy Sullivan stood on the porch of her home, watching the sunset paint the western sky in hues of gold and crimson. The house Mack had built for them on their 10 acres had grown over the years, expanding to accommodate their growing family and prosperity. At 31, Lucy felt settled in a way she once would have thought impossible, content with her life, secure in her husband's love, fulfilled by their shared accomplishments. Behind her, the sound of childish laughter drew her attention back to the warm interior of their home. Through the window, she could see Mack on the floor of their spacious parlor, playing with their 3-year-old son Thomas and 18-month-old daughter Emma. The children's dark hair marked them as their father's, though Emma had inherited Lucy's green eyes. Lucy smiled at the scene, her hand resting unconsciously on her stomach, where a third child had just begun to make its presence known, a secret she planned to share with Mack later that evening. The years had been kind to them, both personally and professionally. Montgomery's general store continued to thrive under Lucy's management, now with a full staff that allowed her to divide her time between the business and her family. Sullivan's Hardware had expanded to include a lumber yard and building supply operation that served not just Willow Creek, but surrounding communities as well. Together, they had become pillars of the growing town, their partnership a model that others admired and sought to emulate. Young couples occasionally sought their advice, curious about the secret to their evident happiness. Lucy always gave the same answer: find someone who waits without complaint, who keeps their promises, who chooses you every day. The front door opened, and Mack stepped out to join her on the porch, having settled the children with Aunt Martha for their bedtime story. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I was just thinking about how fortunate we are," Lucy replied, leaning back against his solid strength. "About how different my life is from what I once imagined it would be. Better or worse?" Mack teased, though he knew the answer. "Infinitely better," Lucy assured him, turning in his arms to face him. "Mack, I have something to tell you." She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. Mack's eyes widened in understanding, then filled with joy. "Lucy," he breathed, "are you sure?" She nodded, smiling at his wonder, which had not diminished with each pregnancy. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. We'll welcome our third child in the fall." Mack gathered her close, his kiss expressing everything words could not: his love, his gratitude, his continued amazement at the life they had built together. When they finally parted, Lucy rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you remember what Randall said to me the day he returned, about how no man had ever waited for me?" "I remember," Mack said, his arms tightening protectively around her. "He was wrong." "He was," Lucy agreed, "but at the time I believed him. I had convinced myself that patience and constancy were virtues no man possessed, at least not where I was concerned." "And now," Mack prompted, echoing their exchange from their wedding night, Lucy looked up at him, her heart full of the certainty that had replaced her former doubts. "Now I know better. I found a man who waited every day without complaint, who taught me that true love isn't about grand gestures or fleeting passion, but about showing up day after day, choosing each other through every challenge and triumph." Mack smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes testament to the years of happiness they had shared. "And I found a woman worth waiting for, worth building a life with, worth loving through all the seasons of our lives." As they stood together in the gathering twilight, the house behind them warm with the sounds of family and the promise of future generations, Lucy reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a broken-hearted woman who had sworn off men forever and a drifting cowboy with no place to call home, to partners in every sense, creators of a legacy built on trust, patience, and unwavering love. She had once declared that no man would ever wait for her. The cowboy who had proved her wrong had given her not just his patience but a lifetime of promises kept, a family to cherish, and a love that continued to deepen with each passing year. And for that, Lucy Sullivan would be forever grateful.